Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In this video, I'm continuing my ongoing lecture into aesthetics. The book that I'm using specifically for this section, though I have several books and resources that I'm using, is the Continental Aesthetics Reader, 2nd edition, so make sure that you get this book. This is the book that I'm using. I've spent quite a bit of time on Heidegger's section. We're approaching 4+ hours of aesthetics analysis that has, up until this point, been solely situated in Heidegger's discourse. I may or may not go through the entirety of Heidegger's discourse, but a lot of the key and critical points with respect to aesthetics is going to come to the surface in this particular section. The section is going to be section 1.4, and we're on page 7 of my notes. As you guys should know by now, in order to access the notes, just click the link in the description field. It'll take you to the PDF. Download the PDF. I've just recently updated it, and follow along. The important points that I want to make very clear is the relationship between the artist, the work of art, the artwork, and the essence of what it is that we are talking about when we talk about art. Right? It's not an easy thing to conceptualize. It's even greater to distinguish sort of the art from the artwork. And what I've done up until this point, hopefully, is to make these very, very nuanced points a little bit more clear so that we can avoid any equivocation in terminology. Specifically in section 1.4, in this section, I think if I've done my job correctly, I'll really bring and hopefully shed a lot more light so that you can have a really clear understanding of where Heidegger, at least my interpretation of Heidegger, where I see Heidegger going in terms of his discussion on aesthetics. So this is section 1.4 of aesthetics, and let's begin. This is Intro to Aesthetics. Okay, this is Introduction to Aesthetics, and this is section 1.4. And this is the work and truth. Alright, so the first bullet point. The problem pertaining to the work of art and the notion of truth, probably in scare quotes, right, arises because truth is thought to be super-temporal. Right? First thing is very important. Truth is thought to be super-temporal. Right? Truth is thought to be super-temporal. Meaning, well, I'll talk about this in a second. Thus, the work as temporal seemingly contradicts the notion of truth. When we talk about something being true, and I don't want to sort of divert the discussion into a metaphysical analysis of truth, but when we talk about something being true, we don't mean true in relative terms, that it's relatively true, right? So that the idea is truth as such, with a big T, is, and this is sort of the ghetto philosophy version, right? Truth in terms of big T is typically conceptualized in terms of a transcendental truth. And you fill in the blanks however you want to define transcendental. More specifically, however, in terms of a historical analysis, we think of instances of truth, right? Instances of truth, but that the truth transcends time, right? Truth with a big T becomes super temporal. So what does that mean? I'll give a classic analysis, and it's the distinction between, and I'm not going to go too much into this now because it doesn't directly pertain, but just to get your head conceptually around where we're going, there is a sense in which we talk about the distinction between propositions which are a priori and propositions which are a posteriori. Right? An a priori proposition, the classic example is a bachelor is an unmarried man, is a truth by definition. That's how it's defined, right? A priori truths are true by the very definition. The definitional aspects reinforce and direct the perceiver, the observer, the logician, not to reality. It doesn't direct, arguably, this is the case, right? It doesn't direct you to the world, but it directs you to the contents of semantic logical relationships, right? So the definition of a bachelor is that he is unmarried. And to be unmarried is to be a bachelor. We recognize that this is, in a sense, a tautological description. To be a bachelor is to be unmarried is tautological. And insofar as we recognize this relationship, that relationship does not require that I, what's called instantiate, I don't materialize or instantiate it within reality, right? I don't instantiate or legitimize it in time, right? It's time independent, if you will. So the idea of supertemporality, to be technical, is itself a time independent construct, arguably. It's a contentious epistemological debate. I'm not going to get into that now. But just so that you have an understanding, when we talk about truth in terms of big T, we usually mean truth in terms of a supertemporality which is itself time independent. And you can go further and say that the propositions that we use to describe this potential state of affairs are themselves more a priori than a posteriori, because a priori propositions are themselves independent to experience. Since experience is itself temporal, then the supertemporality of a priori propositions are themselves independent to time, independent to sort of a historical mode of being, to be technical. That might have been a little too deep. Like, we just started, we're like, less than 10 minutes in. But, so, sorry. That's what it is. Again, we're coming closer to the end of the Heidegger, the Heidegger discourse. Despite the fact that there might be more, I don't want to dedicate, that much time. 4.5 hours into Heidegger's analysis is sufficient, I think. And if you want to read his section in the text for yourself to get the remaining, 5-10 pages that are left, then you can do that yourself. But more than anything, I think the discussion it should be pretty clear now. And we're at a point where, we've done enough, I've done enough analysis into this specific text that it requires a little bit more technical analysis. So let me know if what I just said was a little too deep, and I'll clarify it in the next section. But that's that's where we are. So the second bullet point, a rough definition. Here's a direct quote from Heidegger. In artwork, the truth of beings has set itself to work. In artwork, the truth of being has set itself, right? This is a direct quote, right? In artwork, the truth of beings has set itself to work. Art is truth setting itself to work, right? That's a very important point, right? Art, not artwork. Art is, according to Heidegger, truth setting itself to work. There are many, 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 many ways of interpreting this, but I think if you took good notes, which I hope that you have, if you've taken good notes up until this point, based on the notes that I've provided and my analysis of my own notes in terms of the previous 4 hours worth of lecture, then you should have an understanding of the significance of this statement, right? For Heidegger, and this is a direct quote, art is truth setting itself to work. We recognize that there are parts. You have the artist, you have an essence that we're still trying to make sense of, right? Essence of the work, and we'll put this in quotes, right? We have the essence of the work, we have the artwork, and then the question is, well, where is art? The point is that art is right? The truth. Art is the truth setting itself to work, right? That art, at least at this, and I was trying to think on the drive here this morning, and traffic was friggin' insane, but on the drive here this morning, the idea is how do I draw, how do I visualize the supertemporality of art's